In these days of difficult things, both locally and in the world, I'd like to start out with a moment of levity here. Thank you, Greg Yoder. That was just too cute, wasn't it? Welcome, Rotarians and guests. Thank you to the greeting line today, which was the International Service Committee. If any of you are looking for a committee to work on, it's one of our best. International service, meet great people, travel, do all kinds of great work for the world. And I'd like to welcome District Governor Richard Flanders and also Assistant Governors Gary Shera and Brenda Sweeney, both of our own. You'll get a chance to greet Richard properly in a while, but welcome to all three of you. Thanks for coming. And with that, we've got introductions of guests. Please come up to the microphone in the center and please bring your guest. Go ahead, Karen.
Hi. I'm Karen Fox. And
Karen, hold on a moment. That mic doesn't seem to be picking much up. Go ahead, try it again.
Hello?
There you go. Get right in tight with it if you would.
This is Karen. I was remembering 10-inch thing.
No. Oh, well.
Anyway, Karen Fox, and this is my guest, Kiko Barr. This is her third time at Rotary in 4 weeks, and she will be submitting her application today. So,
welcome. That's fantastic.
And she is a realtor at Keller Williams.
Excellent. Welcome. Rod?
Mr. President, or is it Your Royal Highness? I can't get those straight. This is Octavia Derby. Octavia has a business that is cooking for and serving meals to the homeless. And she has an application pending now before the Rotary Club.
Welcome, Octavia. It's great to see you. You know, it's very strange. I've seen Octavia now 3 or 4 times, but I've only seen half of her face. So hopefully one of these days I'll get to see her whole face.
Hi, Steve. Jason Alexander.
Hi, Jason.
Associate Dean over at San Jose State. Been a member for a couple years. Brian Scannell here is Associate Professor of English over at San Jose State. He's been to a number of our meetings on Zoom, but this is his first time in person. I think he's been dying to come see you all and talk to you all, so you can all help rope him in. Okay?
We'll do the rope-a-dope. Welcome.
President Steve,
Jack Wimberly
again.
Holy cow.
This whole year of paying my dues is paid off. Second time in, what, a few weeks. Happy again to introduce Kate Engelstrom, VP and General Manager of KBM Hogue San Jose. She is also on the application train that we've got going on. So thank you. Good to see you.
I take back all the bad things I said about you, Jack.
Don't even think about it.
Thank you. Welcome.
Mr. President, I have to tell you that past presidents are fallible. I am, and I should tell you that Octavia has been accepted as a member of the
Welcome, Octavia. Octavia, soon you will have a chance to come up here and tell your story, and I look forward to that. Now we're going to present some Paul Harris Awards. So could Mike Block, Howard Loomis, Jerry Silva, and Sue Smith please come up to the stage if you're here, and Teresa's going to be up here helping me. And Richard Flanders, come on up, please. We'll see if Mike and I can get through 30 seconds without saying the word golf. Let's give a round of applause to Mike Block. Next up are the Paul Harris Fellows at various levels. Could all of you who are the new and the previous Paul Harris Fellows please come up and get in line right over here, if you don't mind? I was gonna say, don't all rush at once. There's about 20 of you, I thought. There's one, there's two. Keep on coming. So the first group are new Paul Harris Fellows for $1,000, and that's Sandra Gill, Rod Hibner, and Jennifer Simmons. Any of you here? Here's Sandra. Next group are Paul Harris +1 at $2,000. We've got Ed Correa, Diane Garazzi, Fred Leonard, and Joe Wynn. I know Diane won't be here because I talked to her on the phone the other day and she's in, I think, Venice, Italy.
All right.
Somebody's got to do it. Come on up, Ed. Next group is Paul Harris Fellows +2. That's $3,000 total. We got John Baird, Brad Barron, Dennis Brock, Alden Danner, Lisa Fenton, Art Lund, Al Moore, Jeff Moore, and Dave Roberts. Next group, Paul Harris +3, that's $4,000. John Ball, Mike Conniff, Steve Ellenberg, Jerry Greer, and Joe Quillisi. And Paul Harris +4, that's $5,000. Robert Fox, Mark Skip Franich, and Elizabeth Monley. And Paul Harris +5, that's $6,000. Gary Giannini, Shashir Doctor, and Fernando Zazueta. Let's give a big round of applause to all those donors, please. Thanks to all of you. The club board has a $2,500 discretionary fund that we donate each year to whatever we choose, and we chose to give $1,500 to the Rotary International Wheelchair Foundation. You'll hear when our district governor speaks in a moment that wheelchairs are a very important part of his work. So I'm happy to present that on behalf of the club to the foundation. And I'd like Brenda Sweeney to come on up and introduce the district governor. Gary Sher, did you want to come up also? So with that, Brenda Sweeney.
Yeah, Gary's letting me take all the responsibility for flubbing this up. So So anyways, I've had the opportunity to work with Richard over the past couple of years at the district level. And I can go into his background. He's a lawyer. He's basically a protege of Rick King, a past Rotary International president. But one of the things that I do want to say about him is just my impressions. One of the things about Richard is that he comes across very calm and collected. But when you start to really listen to him and watch his actions, you can see where he's passionate about things. And I think this shows up whenever he talks about his wheelchair project, because you just feel the enthusiasm, the passion, and then he gets people to just give him money for it. So, but anyways, I want to give the time to him. So Richard, let's introduce Richard Flanders, our district governor.
Would it be okay if I take my mask off while I'm speaking? Thank you. Well, thank you for having me today at your club. You're the biggest club in our district, 430 plus members. And I also want to thank Steve and your club for giving us the $1,500 toward the district projects, which is wheelchairs project. What we're going to do is that we're going to collect 1 or 2 containers of wheelchair, which is 560 wheelchairs, and we will deliver them to Mexico, assemble them and deliver them to give the wheelchairs to the needies. And so far, our goal was 2 containers. I think we're over 1 container, and we're just in the 2nd month of our Rotary year. So thank you very much. I just want to take a little bit of time to really recognize Gary Shera. He he's my assistant governor in the district. I want to thank him to help us to do the district programs in the district. And also Brenda, she has been the district treasurer the past 2 years, and she's also assisting Gary, but I think she's more busy than Gary because she's also our district wheelchair project chair, and she is working to put the donation form on the district website. She has the paper form. So as Steve has stated, this is what we're trying to push for, and we hope to deliver the wheelchairs in the springtime in Mexico. I also want to thank Rod Deridan. Rod has been our district climate action sustainability chair, has been doing a great job. Each year, the committee has expanded beyond our district. And so he is a pro at the climate and sustainability program for Rotary. I also want to thank Ed Correa. He is on our district public image team this year, and he really helped us to really do public image throughout the district, helping clubs. I also want to recognize my friend, Maggie Padovani from Rotary Club of Cupertino. She's actually the public image chair for our district. So Ed and Maggie work together to help the clubs in our district with their public image. And I also want to thank Steve for his leadership of this club. I've been talking to Steve 3 or 4 times since last year, and he is going to do a good job for this club, and we thank him for his time because this is a tough job. And I have to say that my oldest friend in this club was Roy Russell. He passed away in January, and Mike Conniff and Roy and I, we used to hang out together whenever I'm down in San Jose because we both were group study exchange team leaders for group study exchange team. And Mike led the team to Argentina, Roy led the team to Vietnam, and I led the team to Thailand. So we have a lot in common among the 3 of us. So I really miss Roy. This is a difficult time for club leaders like Steve and me and board members because we went through a pandemic last year. As a result of the pandemic, we lost about 90 members in our district, which is pretty good considering. And so I met with the board this morning, and your club is going to get new members to join your club. I mean, I think we have 4 that stood up here earlier. So thank you, and I think this is a good time to ask your friends, colleagues, family, neighbors who have been depressed and lonely in this pandemic, that maybe this is an opportunity for them to come out and join you, to join this club, and have fellowship and do service in the community as well as internationally. When I speak with the club presidents in the spring, there are 61 of us, I sense a lot of hope and optimism as we're coming out of the pandemic. People are excited about going back to in-person meetings. I mean, a lot of clubs has a real high attendance when they go back in person. So, but we also have challenges because the hybrid meeting, as you can tell, half of the members stay home and half come in person. So, as we're coming out of the pandemic, we really cannot go back and change what we started, but I think we can change the ending. So that's what we want to do. In terms of the district governor district program this year, we really emphasized 3 focuses. One is membership. We already talked about that. We also want to thank you. The second one is Rotary Foundation. We also want to thank you for contributing about $35,000 to the Rotary Foundation last year. We appreciate that. And your gifts led to many projects all over the world helping people who needs help. And the last focus that we really want to emphasize is public image. We have not done anything, frankly, in public image the last few years. So Maggie and her team, we met every month, and we're going to do something this year. And it'll be announced at the September leadership meeting, where we're going to help clubs with public image, whether it's website, social media, newspaper, billboard, whatever they want to do, we're going to help them with that. There's 2 district events that we would invite you to come. One is our Avenues of Service Barbecue, which is an annual tradition in our club. And this will happen live in person in the Alameda County Fairgrounds in Pleasanton. So I think that we are going to have a lot of registration for the Avenues of Service. And so we're excited because the theme will be Hawaiian theme. And we're going to have Hawaiian food, Hawaiian drinks, a lot of projects, fairs, display. And also the speaker that we have asked to come was the first female president of the Rotary Club of Honolulu. She was the first district governor in Hawaii, and she's the first news anchor in Hawaii. She did television news anchor, and she's a great Rotary speaker. So I hope that you will come to this event on October 2nd, Saturday in the morning in the Alameda County Fairgrounds in Pleasanton. The other event that we're doing is, which is also a tradition in our club, is district conference. We have our annual district conference. This year, it will happen on April 22, 23, 24, and we will start the district conference at the Black Hawk Museum in San Ramon, Danville, San Ramon, and then we transition everything to the San Ramon Marriott. I'm not sure I can play the video. Let me see. Let me end my remark with a story. Some of you probably know that I was born in Indonesia. When I was 12 years old, my father was diagnosed with liver cancer. Back in the 70s, the medicine was primitive in Indonesia. And anybody with liver cancer today probably do not have high survival rate. My brother and I were young. My mom told us that my father had a kidney stone and he needed treatment. So he took my father to Taipei, Taiwan, to get treatment because in Indonesia, you know, even today, I'm not sure how good the medicine is. So off they went to Taipei, Taiwan. And about 30 days later, my mom came home alone. My father did not make it. While dying at the hospital, my mom told him not to worry because we will be together again. His body was cremated and put in an urn and placed in a temple in Taipei, Taiwan, a Buddhist temple. She brought my brothers and I to the United States. 22 years later, she passed away. My brother and I remember her promise. So we decided to bring our father's remains to the United States. The problem is that we did not know anybody in Taiwan. All we had was a little writing in Chinese. So I asked my Rotarian boss whether he knew anybody in Taiwan. He referred me to a Rotarian, so I faxed a letter to the Rotarian and asked whether he could help me to bring my father's remains back to the United States. He said he would. So my brother and I flew to Taipei, Taiwan. This Rotarian came to pick us up at the airport. He put us up in a hotel. The next day, he picked us up from the hotel and took us for breakfast. After breakfast, we drove somewhere, and he told us that, I believe I have found your father's remains here in Taipei. So we drove about an hour, and we stopped at a parking lot at a Buddhist temple. We got off our car, we walked in the door. Sitting on the front of the lobby was a table, and on top of the table was my father's remains. I know that because I saw his picture on the outside of the urn. So we asked the monk whether we can bring the urns back to the United States. The monk said, no. How do we know that you are the right family? So the Rotarian told us to wait in the hallway, and he told us that he wanted to talk to the monk. 10 minutes later, he came out, and he told us that we could bring the urns back. I asked him, how did he do that? He said, because I'm a Rotarian, and I guarantee the monk that if there's any problem, he would need to look for him. So my brother and I hand carried the urn back on the airplane. We came home. We had a joint memorial service for my father and my mom back here in the United States. I did not know that when I joined Rotary 6 years earlier, that someone 6,500 miles away would lend his hand, took the time, took the effort to help my father's, to help us find my father's remains. You see, people in Rotary are people of action. We help people who need help, and that's what we do in Rotary. The person that helped me, by the way, his name is Gary C.K. Huang, and 13 years later, he became Rotary International President from Taiwan. So we remain friends since 2001, and I'm pretty sure that what he did, his service, changed my life. And I'm sure what he did for me also changed his life. Every one of us has a Gary Huang in Rotary. It could be the person sitting next to you. It could be a person who left the club last year and maybe it's time to call him or her to come back because circumstances have changed. It may be someone that you don't know yet, but maybe someone that you may want to invite to Rotary and join our great organization, because our organization is about fellowship, friendship, and service. I think that's all I have for now, Steve. Thank you very much.
Oh my God.
Thank you, Richard. That was a fine speech. It's been a real pleasure to get to know you over the last year. So thank you for all the work you do. It's now my pleasure to introduce Jason Alexander, who's going to introduce today's speaker.
Good afternoon again. When I first moved to California in 2016, I moved to San Diego from Chicago, Illinois, and I was struck by the fact that there didn't seem to be any seasons. I had a washing machine and a dryer that were outside my house. It didn't make any sense to me at all. And I asked a colleague about it down there, and he said, oh no, we've got seasons. We've got fire season, we got mudslide season, and we have earthquake season, which can happen anytime. And I didn't really appreciate how serious fire season in particular is, or its connection to mudslide season, until, especially when I was evacuated from my own home in Boulder Creek last year for about 3 weeks. Karen Philbrick, one of our fellow Rotarians, was very generous and offered to put me and my family up in her house when she was out of town. It was a very welcome gesture. But I wanted to know more about this fire season thing, and I thought, I know the guy I can ask. The trick is I'm going to have to convince the program committee to get him to come here and answer all your questions in order to get him to answer mine. So I want to introduce Dr. Craig Clements to you. Dr. Clements is professor of meteorology at San Jose State University and director of the Wildfire Interdisciplinary Research Center. In his role as director of that center, Professor Clements is the lead researcher at SJSU on topics relating to fire weather, extreme fire behavior, fire atmosphere interactions, and wildland fire field experiments. His own research has been featured in places such as PBS Nova, Rolling Stone, New York Times, Time Magazine, CNN, and Scientific American. In his presentation today, I'm sure that Craig, Dr. Clements, will give you a more detailed sense of what all those responsibilities entail, of the size of the center, its main research focuses, and so on. But in particular, I've asked him here to answer my questions about fire season, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to introduce Craig to you all so that he can answer your questions as well. I ask you to join me in welcoming Dr. Clements this afternoon.
Thank you, Jason, and thanks for having me here today. It's an honor. Let's see here. I guess I clicked the slides. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to give you kind of a roundabout discussion of what we're doing in our center, how it developed, and some core research activities that we do, which is quite unique in terms of our capability here at San Jose State. In 2020, we hired 5 tenure-track faculty in wildfire science. It's the largest cluster hire in wildfire sciences in the US. And we've welcomed these faculty on the campus virtually. Now this semester, they're finally able to step on campus. So we've got a unique capability with atmospheric modeling and fire prediction. We have a social scientist, Dr. Amanda Stasowicz, who does wildfire management and policy and looks at wildfire evacuation, community resilience, and these types of things that are really important for all our communities in the area. And I skipped Adam Kochansky, who's the leading expert, international expert in wildfire modeling. And I'll show you some of his modeling examples. We're currently modeling the Caldor fire, which is burning into South Lake Tahoe as we speak, and the Dixie fire, which is the largest fire on record. And I'll show you some pictures from our deployment to the Dixie a little bit later. Dr. Ali Tohidi is a mechanical engineer who focuses on fire dynamics and looking at how fire spread through firebrand generation. Dr. Kate Wilkin is a fire ecologist who specializes in chaparral ecosystems, which is quite a unique area. California, if you're familiar with our shrublands, which are the forested areas that have lots of shrubs and they burn really hot and they're quite dangerous. So it's a unique ecosystem that we have to consider when we look at fire ecology. And then Dr. Miguel Valero, he's a remote sensing specialist who uses satellite technologies and drone technologies over fires. And what happened just recently, we were just awarded a National Science Foundation Industry University Cooperative Research Center grant. And so this allows us to cooperate with industry members, so particularly the utilities or the what we call IOUs, investor-owned utilities, PG&E, San Diego Gas and Electric. Also insurance companies and different startup companies that provide products and data to agencies that are dealing with the wildfire problem. So this is just taking off as we speak. We just were awarded, and so it's quite an exciting time here at San Jose State. We also have agencies such as the U.S. Forest Service, CAL FIRE, and Lawrence Livermore National Lab. But this is kind of the core of the center. It's an industry center, so it's not faculty having what's exciting is that we are going to be able to fast track research because the industry provides the funds internally to do the research, and we just propose internally what we want to do, and the industry drives that. This is different than the typical university mechanism where you apply to the National Science Foundation or to NASA or NOAA and wait 6 months, get your reviews back, reapply, and it's been a year. So now we can just get going and solve these problems. So it's quite exciting. So for example, let's show you this here. Whoop. This is the a simulation from last summer of the CZU complex fire and the SCU complex fire. So we had, and as you remember, San Jose was, we had fires on both sides of the city and 2 different mountain ranges, creating lots of smoke. And as Jason mentioned earlier, lots of evacuations in the Santa Cruz Mountains, which really hasn't happened before. And so with this new modeling tool, you can see what it does is it allows us to look at fire behavior at very high resolution. We can look at fire risk at a neighborhood scale, and we can calculate smoke impacts at every neighborhood. So we can determine if tomorrow it's going to be a bad day inside or outside, so you may have to remain inside. So this has a lot of implications. The insurance industry is very excited about this type of work because they want to know what houses not to insure or what houses to insure, and that's a big debacle here in California, as you can imagine. And so it's true that it's getting worse and we just can't get out of this fire season. I mean, we're just in the core of it and we've already had our biggest fire on record, the Dixie fire. And it's not really stopping. And these fires are almost unstoppable. It's just uncanny how this is turning out. We have the largest, I don't know if you've seen the recent reports, but we have more firefighters in California than ever. The Dixie fire and the Caldor fire is the #1 priority fire in the United States right now. And so if you've ever been to South Lake Tahoe, our simulation, I was just looking at this morning, it looks like Strawberry could be affected by later tonight, early tomorrow morning. That's a place that I spend a lot of time at. It's a beautiful little community, and these little communities just have a lot of issues. So I'm going to stop blabbering on and get through my presentation. So here's a slide on wildfire policy and management. I think this has a lot to do with what we need to deal with in all our communities in California, particularly looking at fire adapted communities. We need homeowners and communities to really be responsible for their property. And it's a challenge because a lot of people are moving out of the city and they're moving into the mountains, and that's where this problem arises. So let's talk a little bit about the fire environment, and what we like to talk about is the fire behavior triangle. So fires are driven, or the behavior of every fire is driven by the weather, obviously, how hot, dry, and windy it is, the topography, and the fuels. We have a lot of fuels in the Sierra Nevada. We have a lot of fuels in Santa Cruz Mountains. These need to be burned regularly. They need to be removed. And we had 100 years of fire suppression through the U.S. Forest Service policy of stop all fires. Fuels built up. It's now drier with climate change, and these fires are just so hot. But what my focus is on is the weather and how the weather drives fire behavior, which is some of the most dynamic aspects of fire. I'm going to show you this figure here. This is from a colleague of mine in Australia, Andrew Sullivan, who showed that, look at all these models. We have all these different fire prediction models. Which one do you pick? Right? Is there one model that we can use? Well, no, because they're all done empirically. So they're using short shrubs in Australia. They're using pine needles in Georgia. They're using different fuel types, different wind speeds, different conditions. And so we really need to have a better modeling system. And that's what the core of our research at San Jose State is looking at, is building that. We've done some experiments in New Zealand. And so this is just kind of showing you some cameras. This is work with New Zealand researchers, the U.S. Forest Service and San Jose State, looking at very small grass fires and how those fires spread so we can better understand the dynamics. We use thermal cameras so we can look at the heat transfer to the fuels, where the hottest part of the fire is, how the flames are laying down, how they stand up, and how with the effects of topography. So we're looking at these very small scale processes in fire spread to better understand it so we can model it and use those new physics into our prediction system. So that's kind of where we're doing the field scale stuff. But what about looking at real fires and big fires? So how do we sample a large wildfire? And that's kind of our niche here at San Jose State, is we have a couple of mobile assets. We're the only meteorological team in the US that is fireline qualified. So we all go fireline, we get through the firefighter training every year, and we have a certificate, so we can actually be called up to a fire as a national resource, which is quite unique because it allows us access beyond the fire line to collect data. Because it's one of the phenomena. One thing about wildfire, and this speaking as a meteorologist, if you know, storm chasers, and we've got severe weather in the Midwest, we have hurricanes in the Southeast, and there's lots of resources provided for researching that phenomenon. But when we think about wildfires, there's not a lot of resources, not a lot of research funding for wildfires. And so it's a lot of different groups that are trying to tackle this problem. And so what we've done is we've come up with a way to do rapid response deployments to wildfires, being fireline qualified. We check in with the incident command. On the Dixie fire, we were requested to the fire, so we brought our assets up. Those were the 2 days where the fire laid down and did nothing. And then we left, came back to San Jose, and then it blew up again. So the incident meteorologist said, your radar is really good at suppressing the fire. I don't know what it does, but it's really good at that. And I was like, yeah, well, that's not kind of what we were hoping to do. And the students were really kind of sad because we went on our first fire and we didn't get to see anything. So we provide data to the incident management team. We measure the winds, we measure where the fire is kind of going. And so we do this on the ground truth verification. And that allows us to better build our modeling tools and better predict and provide data to society. This is kind of the data set that we collect. We can scan this plume, and these are observations. So this is Doppler LiDAR. It's a laser-based radar, and so we can scan the plume. We can look at where it's going, what the winds are doing inside the plume. And so this is a picture of that plume. It looks a lot like the data. And so here's the LiDAR on the back of the truck, and we scan it. This is the El Portal fire from 2014. We've been to over now 40 fires in California, and we've sampled a lot of different conditions. And these are the kind of data sets that we need. We need to sample the wildfire environment to better understand the conditions, because all you hear about is this is epic. It's never been seen before. And actually, that is true. But over the last 10 years, we're starting to see these fires just getting bigger and more intense and hotter. So we need to be able to study them. We had an excellent opportunity because of an NSF grant that I had to fly an aircraft over and through a very large pyrocumulonimbus. So this is a thunderstorm generated from an active wildfire. This was over, this is the Pioneer Fire in Idaho. And we studied this. They flew through it. You can't see the aircraft in that photo, but this is a big fire. This is what's happening all over California this season. And we measured some of the strongest updrafts. These are strong vertical velocities, 130 miles an hour, almost 60 meters per second, 130 mile an hour updraft in these clouds. So you cannot fly through these. It's a very dangerous environment. And so if you have 130 mile an hour wind, you can loft a big chunk of burning something, whether it's a tree, piece of bark, a branch, or just leaves. And those embers, or what we call firebrands, they travel downwind, they land and start new fires. This is a big problem. This is how fires are spreading. This is why it's like, yeah, they built this 2-mile wildfire line and it crossed it. Well, how does a fire cross that? It's because these embers are getting up in the atmosphere and they're falling down way downstream. So it's pretty extreme conditions. And now we're finally figuring out what's inside these fire plumes. So we went to NSF and said, hey, we flew this radar, can we get a radar ourselves? And so we wrote a proposal and we were able to purchase what's called a cloud radar. So we have the only mobile radar in the Western US here at San Jose State. It's truck mounted. And so we can deploy this to wildfires. And here's what the data look like when we sample it. So we can see velocity fields. So up here this is the reflectivity. So that's kind of the stuff, the ash and debris from the fire. Over here is the velocity, the panel over here on the upper right is the velocity. And then we have these other outputs from the radar. And so we can actually scan these plumes and look at the velocity field inside the fire, which is a first, because nobody's ever done that. And these plumes get pretty big. And so this is what a pyrocumulonimbus looks like. This is at a prescribed fire in Utah. But last Monday, or a week ago Monday, we were able to deploy to the Dixie Fire. And this is what it looked like as the fire, first time in history that the fire has burned over the Sierra Crest and down to Highway 395. So these are a group of students, myself and a colleague from the University of Nevada, Reno, who joined us, and we are scanning these fire vortices. So the fire is actually turning, the plume is turning and creating the onset of a potential fire tornado. Turns out more fire tornadoes are occurring in California than anywhere else on the planet, and that's because of the topography, the fuels are so dry, and we just have these intense fires. And so it's a big problem, and it's a big danger for fighters on the ground. So these tools actually allow us to peer in and see those types of dynamics. So what our next step is, that's kind of a highlight of what we're doing, what we can observe on the fire line using these new technologies. And what we're implementing now is taking these data in real time, transfer them into San Jose State, because we have a brand new HPC for fire modeling. And we can bring those data in, and that helps tune our model in real time. So that's the ultimate goal. Miguel Valera, our new faculty, is building a new airborne sensor system that we can put on aircraft, and then we're scaling it down to put on UAS or unmanned aircraft systems or drones. Drones are still not used on fires. They're just starting to get used on fires now for firing operations. So that's exciting new technology that they're embracing. CAL FIRE is starting to look at new modeling tools, including our model system. So things are really ramping up in terms of the technology that's being used to fight these fires, not just boots on the ground and aircraft to put out the fire, but using technology and intelligence and information to get a better handle on these conditions. So that's kind of where we're going. And if I would leave you with one message, is that there's lots of investment in the technologies now from different regions of the business sector. Everybody's throwing in and getting the newest Any questions? Do we have time for a couple?
Absolutely. So if you'd like to ask questions, please come up and get in line at the central microphone.
Oh,
Rod-
wow, okay.
Rod, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us. As a person who grew up on Mount Shasta, I think we all knew that the area was becoming overgrown. But what do you do about it? If you let the fires go, now the forest goes too, the timber goes too.
Right.
And timber is a way of earning a living up there. And if you try to get in there and cut it down by hand, it's a never-ending job.
Right. So what they are doing, what the Forest Service is actually doing is they are going in and they're physically removing trees, but they're also putting in prescribed fire. So it's a combination of both, adding low-intensity fire in the off-seasons to reduce the fuel load. So when you have a big wildfire, what's happening now is these wildfires are so intense, there's so much fuel that they can't stop them. We need low-intensity fire in these forests, and we also need to mechanically remove the fuels too. So thank you for your question.
When they report on the fires, they give a percentage of how contained a fire might be. It'll be 20% or 30%, and yet you see the fire continue to grow. How do they arrive at these estimates of percentage?
So that containment line is how much they have a buffer. So they build a fire line. So they got 20%, let's say 20%, that fire's got a line around at 20%, and it will likely not cross that line. What happened in like around July 31st, that but that's what they mean, is that it's pretty much contained on that side, but then it keeps growing.
Quick question about the Caldor fire. Just a little more detailed update in particular, the Placerville, Diamond Springs area, and how much of a threat it is to South Tahoe.
Well, I honestly haven't been really watching it as much as I should, but it looks like, I don't know how it's burning downslope and what, burning towards Placerville, but our simulations show that it's going to be in Strawberry tomorrow. And then if it gets, here's the big problem is, South Lake Tahoe, they're starting to talk about evacuations. So it's kind of, can you imagine a fire burning from one side of the Sierra to the other? And how does that happen? Spot fire. And those fuels in Tahoe Basin are just as dry as the fuels in the West Slope, if not maybe drier, who knows? So it can be challenging. So the fire front's not going to cross over the rock and burn down. It's spotting that would ignite probably, was that Christmas Valley right on the pass there? But yeah, luckily they had the Angora fire there about 7 years ago, and that probably reduced some fuels in that area here. Okay.
So every year for the past, 6, 7 years, California has experienced one after another the historically largest fire that's ever been experienced in California. And Napa, Sonoma, the Santa Cruz Mountains due to lightning fires. What can be done through your modeling, if anything, that would help communities prepare and understand? Is there fire hardening that can go on that that would really help communities survive or know what to do?
Yeah, so not only our work or modeling capability, but other research out there, basically you can determine the risk of these communities. Most communities have a fire risk map. If you looked at move, what's the fire risk? Oh, it's high. It's not going to affect my insurance. But what you can do, some of these communities that are already in place, now they're like, we've been here in the redwoods for 100 years. Why is it a big deal now? It's because the fuels have changed. We haven't cleared the shrubs and we haven't cleared the trees. We haven't allowed fire in those forests. So what we can do is we can start clearing and putting in low intensity prescribed fire around these communities. Another thing is development. We should not be letting new housing go into these areas because it's just going to be a problem in the next few years. But yeah, and there's also home hardening issues that you can look into. Nobody has a shake roof really in California, and that's because of fire danger, but that's not always the problem. It's pine needles in the gutters, pine needles on your ground. Pine needles can put a layer. I did this experiment at San Jose State when we were allowed to burn on campus in the driveway. You'd lay pine needles, just an inch of pine needles, and you light it, and I asked the students, what do you think the flames are going to do? The flames are this tall. Imagine having a whole season of pine needle and duff around your house. That's every house, 3,000 feet to 6,000 feet in elevation in Sierra Nevada. So you're going to have flames like this burning up to your house. That's a lot of heat. So that could ignite a house. So clearing the landscape around your home is really critical. Thank you for your question.
Comment and question. I was up at Whitaker Forest in King Canyon area, and I drove down one of the fire roads, and for 2 miles, it looked like literally the forest had been raked. It was perfectly perfect. And then I went into Whitaker Forest, which was the home of the University of California Forestry School forever, and nothing had been raked. It had all that terrible fuel. Now, my question is, that where does forestry, where does the lumber industry come into play to basically thin out our forests, if that is one of the solutions?
Well, great comment and question. Yes. So if you drive up, and I use these pictures in my class. You drive up Highway 88, you look on one side, they've hired contractors. The U.S. Forest Service has contracted out to some forestry companies to do some clearing, where they pull out the trees and they leave. And the answer is, when you look through the forest, if you can't see through the forest, that's a problem. The Sierra Nevada should be open. It should be low shrub, very open with few trees. You should be able to get sunlight through the forest canopy. If you drive up through Arnold in some of these places on Highway 4 or Highway 88, you can't see. You can't see the houses behind the trees. That is a problem. So you have to masticate. You have to pull the stuff out, and you have to bring in fire. But yeah, that's exactly what you would see: a managed forest and unmanaged. Yeah.
So let me tee this off. About a week and a half ago, I read that the 5 largest fires in California history have all happened since 2018. And what I see in the press and from a lot of people is global warming. But everything you said so far gets back to forest management, clearing, controlled burns, etc. What are the things that we could have done, maybe the 1 or 2 things we could have done to avoid what we've had the last half decade at least? And what are the things we should be doing going forward? Things are most important.
Thank you. I think it comes down to the forest condition. If you talk to fire ecologists, they'll say us, we should be burning 3 to 4,000 acres. I think it's like 4 to 5 million acres a year before European arrival in California. And that's what was burning because of lightning, Native American practices. That was normal. It was smoky here. Scott Stevens at UC Berkeley, he says this all the time, that we should need more fire. This is what it was. And then we stopped fire. With fire suppression, we let the fuels build up, and then those fuels dried out because we have a drier climate, it's a slightly warmer, and that's the problem. If we didn't have the, so again, if you go back to the fire behavior triangle, you don't have the fuels, you have nothing to burn. But if you had the fuels and then you add climate change and extreme weather, then that becomes a problem. So everything is lining up these last few years. Think about 2019. The biggest fire was the Kincaid fire up in Sonoma. There was nothing happening in 2019, but 2018 was historic. 2020 was historic, but 2019, nothing happened. So how is it climate change? Well, it just so happened that 2019 was cooler. It was a more wet spring. And so our fuel moisture content, the amount of water in the fuels, was higher throughout the summer. So it wasn't until like October that we were really in a grave situation, which typically is what we expect in California. But we're going to see a couple low years and a bunch of high years, and it's just trending up. And that's just the way it is, unfortunately. Thanks.
I was really interested to hear about your industry partnerships and that model. It's really encouraging that there's more urgency around that. What kind of industries are you guys partnering with?
And so they're coming up with new, and it's the reinsurance agencies, the reinsurance industry that's really, pushing this because they insure the insurance companies, so they're taking the hit. So a lot of insurance is getting involved. Utilities, obviously. Turns out utilities are driving wildfire research ahead of the federal government. I told this to Congress in June. They are pushing it because they have to. They have to be on top of it. And even though PG&E is still, there's still issues with their lines and such a complex network, they still have one of the largest wildfire research groups in the state. Anyways, last question.
Final brief question and brief answer, Craig, if you would.
Mine kind of a follow-up on that one. We have property in Oregon, and just 2 months ago, we got a note from our insurance company saying that they're going to offer for free fire suppression services. If our house is in the fire train, then they will send a crew up there to spray with anti-fire retardant, set up sprinklers, do all that for free, not an issue. So I'm wondering about in your partnership with insurance, it seems to me on two sides, proactivity like this, but also decisions about insurance companies of what they'll insure at what price really will drive human behavior. People are motivated by incentives.
Right.
So what is happening in that?
Real quick, so Amanda's looking at what people are doing for their homes, and we're also looking at what insurance companies are willing to offer. Insurance companies are very interested in people that are actually proactive. So if you're removing the fuels, and the firefighters do this too, by the way, like if CAL FIRE drives up your street, and if they can barely get up your driveway, if you've got beautiful oaks hanging over your tree, over your house, they're like, yeah, we don't have a chance to that one. But they come up to one that's been totally cleared, and kind of ugly landscaping. Oh, we'll save that house because we have a chance, right? So anyways, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig, for a fine talk. We will be making a donation in your name to a wildfire relief organization, which I will talk to you about after the meeting, please. Reminder that next week we have the fall barbecue, so don't show up here, show up at the barbecue. Please sign up and please go. The cutoff is Monday noon to do that. Also, October 1st, we have the International Feast event scheduled. You can make reservations in the lobby after the meeting or online. And a reminder, September 8th, our speaker will be Andrew Fracknoy, speaking on rovers, helicopters, and ancient Martians, why we explore Mars. If you haven't ever heard Andrew Fracknoy, he's a top-notch speaker. I highly recommend that you show up. And with that, have a great week. We'll see you next week.